Every morning, the cat carried a tiny baby sock to the cafe doormat and left it there. He did this for 3 weeks straight, without missing a single day. Priya had owned him long time ago, but she had no clue why her cat brings baby sock on the cafe doormat every morning. She ran Saffron Cup, a small cafe on Millward Street. Mango was the name of her cat. He was 7 years old, orange and broad-shouldered, with amber eyes that always looked like they were thinking something through. Not the kind of cat who did things without a reason. Mango had lived in the cafe almost as long as it had existed. He slept on the window bench in the afternoons and accepted chin scratches from strangers with the dignified tolerance of someone doing a favor. He was, by every measure, the most settled and predictable creature Priya had ever known. Which was exactly why the socks made no sense. The first one appeared on a Monday. Priya almost stepped on it, pushing open the front door at 6 in the morning. A single baby sock, striped in yellow and white, sitting in the center of the doormat, like it had been placed there intentionally. She looked at it for a moment, then picked it up and set it on the counter and forgot about it entirely by the time the first customer arrived. The second sock appeared on Wednesday, red, with a small embroidered star near the cuff. Again, on the doormat. Again, placed with that same strange neatness. She looked at Mango. He was sitting 3 feet away, watching her face with those steady amber eyes. "Did you bring this?" she asked. He blinked once and walked away toward the kitchen. By the end of the second week, there were 9 socks lined up on the shelf behind the counter. Her assistant, a young man named Callum, who made excellent espresso and asked very few serious questions, noticed them on a Thursday afternoon. "Are those baby socks?" he asked. "Mango keeps bringing them," Priya said. Callum stared at the shelf for a long moment. Where is he getting baby socks? I have absolutely no idea. He nodded slowly, the way people nod when they have decided not to pursue something further. A regular named Dorothea, who came in every morning for a flat white, leaned over the counter and examined the collection with great interest.
"My cousin's cat used to bring her hair ties," Dorothea offered. Never figured out where those came from either. Cats are strange little creatures.
Everyone laughed and moved on. Priya smiled along with them. But that evening, after Callum had gone home and the chairs were up on the tables, she sat at the counter and looked at the 9 socks and felt that quiet pulling feeling again. Mango jumped up beside her and sat very still, staring at the front door. "What is it?" she said quietly. He did not move, just stared at the door. The 11th sock appeared on a rainy Tuesday morning. It was rainbow-striped, the brightest one yet, and it was damp at the toe, as if it had been carried through the wet alley behind the building. Priya picked it up and stood there holding it in the gray morning light. Something in her chest decided something, though she could not have explained exactly what. She looked at Mango. He was already moving, not toward the kitchen, not toward the window bench. He was walking toward the back door of the cafe, the one that opened into the narrow service alley running behind the row of buildings on Millward Street. He stopped at the door and looked back at her. Priya grabbed her coat. Before we get to what Priya found that morning, please don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps this channel grow. Now, back to the story. The alley smelled of rain and wet concrete. Mango moved without hesitation, his paws silent on the slick ground, his tail low and purposeful. Priya followed 3 steps behind, her coat pulled tight, her breath making small clouds in the cold air. She had walked past this alley 1,000 times. She had taken the bins out through it twice a week for 6 years. She had never once looked at it as a place where anything could be hidden. Mango turned left at the end of the alley, past the rusted drain pipe and the stack of old wooden pallets she had been meaning to have collected for months. He stopped at a narrow gap between the back of her building and the side wall of the old print shop next door. The gap was maybe 2 feet wide. It was dry inside. Barely, but dry. Mango sat down at the entrance of the gap and looked at Priya. She crouched down. Inside the gap, wrapped in a flattened cardboard box and covered with a man's oversized jacket, was a girl. She looked about 17. Dark hair, pale face, eyes wide open and staring back at Priya with an expression that was equal parts fear and exhaustion and something else entirely. Something that looked like relief so old it had almost forgotten what it felt like. And pressed against the girl's chest, wrapped inside the jacket with her, was a baby, newborn, eyes closed, breathing in the slow, steady way of something very new to the world. Priya did not speak for a moment. She simply stayed crouched at the entrance of that narrow gap in the rain, looking at this girl and this baby, her mind very quietly rearranging everything she thought she had understood about the last 3 weeks. "How long have you been here?" Priya finally asked. Her voice came out softer than she intended. The girl swallowed. 11 days, she said. Her name was Sarah. She was 16, not 17 as Priya had guessed, and she had come to this neighborhood by a route that was long and complicated and involved a series of decisions made by adults who should have known better. She had aged out of a temporary foster placement 2 months ago. She had no family she could contact. She had found the gap behind the print shop on her 3rd night sleeping outside, and she had stayed because it was the driest place she had found, and because she was too frightened and too proud to walk into a shelter with a newborn and no documentation and no clear explanation for any of it. The baby's name was Fen. He was 13 days old. Priya sat on an overturned crate in her own alley in the rain and listened to all of this without interrupting once. "The socks," she said when Sarah finished. "Where did they come from?" Sarah looked down at the baby. "There is a charity donation bin outside the church on the next street. Someone left a bag of baby things beside it a few weeks ago. I took what I needed from it. Some of the socks kept falling out of the jacket when I moved around at night." She paused. "Your cat used to come and sit with me in the evenings. I did not know where he came from. He just started showing up. He would sit beside me for an hour or 2 and then leave. I did not think much of it." Priya looked at Mango. He was sitting at the entrance of the gap, perfectly still, watching both of them. He had been visiting Sarah every evening for nearly 2 weeks. He had been picking up the socks that fell, and every morning he had carried one to the cafe doormat and left it there, and looked at Priya and waited for her to understand. For 11 mornings, she had not understood. Priya felt something press hard against the back of her throat. "Come inside," she said. "Both of you. Right now." Sarah hesitated. The hesitation of someone who has been let down enough times that even kindness feels like something to be cautious about. Priya recognized it without naming it. "I am not going to call anyone without talking to you first," Priya said carefully. "I am going to make you something hot to eat. That is all I am doing right now. Just come inside." Sarah looked at the baby. Then she looked at Priya. Then she stood up slowly, one arm cradling Fen against her chest. Mango walked ahead of them both, back down the alley and through the cafe's back door, as if he had planned this exact sequence of events and was simply seeing it through to its conclusion. Priya made eggs and toast and a pot of strong, sweet tea. Sarah sat at the small table in the back kitchen and ate with the focused silence of someone who had not had a proper meal in longer than she wanted to admit. Fen slept through all of it in the crook of her arm. Callum arrived an hour later, took one look at the situation, and without a word put on a second pot of tea and went to open the front of the cafe as if nothing unusual was happening at all. Priya was grateful for this more than she could say. Over the following hours, carefully and without pressure, Priya made some calls. She had a friend named Bet who worked as a family support coordinator at a community organization 3 streets away. Bet arrived at lunchtime, sat with Sira for a long time, and spoke to her the way you speak to someone when you are genuinely trying to understand, rather than simply trying to process them. It was not simple, and it was not fast. These things never are. But it was a beginning. And beginnings, Priya had learned, were the only thing that actually mattered. Sarah and Finn stayed in the back room of the cafe for 2 nights, while Bet worked to find them a proper placement, a real one, with support and stability and people who would not disappear. On the 3rd morning, a place opened up, a small, supported housing unit for young mothers, 15 minutes away by bus. Bet drove them there herself. Priya stood at the cafe door and watched the car pull away. Mango sat beside her on the step, his tail wrapped neatly around his paws. "You knew from the very first sock," she said quietly. He did not look up at her. He was watching the street in that way he had, steady and unhurried, like someone who has already decided how things are going to turn out. Sarah still comes to Saffron Cup every Thursday morning. She brings Fen, who is 4 months old now, and has recently discovered that his own hands exist, and finds this absolutely astonishing. Callum makes her the same order every week without being asked, a cardamom tea and 1 piece of cinnamon toast. He slides it across the counter, and she sits at the window bench, and Mango settles in beside her like no time has passed at all. The 11 socks still sit on the shelf behind the counter. Priya has not moved them. She does not intend to.